The difference is required here to be shown the flow, whether it is sniffing or spoofing. Actually, it is a context via which you are going to identify either it is a static attack being happening or an active attack. The flow has to be exposed in both cases. When we talk about a message authentication, or when we talk about the flow, whatever exposure, the flow, so sniffing or message spoofing, it's both of them. They are actually to be happening on top of exposing the flow. Then after, whether the message itself, the content, the flow itself, the sender or the receiver, any of them, those credentials, if they get actually modified or altered or concealed or hidden, this is a spoofing. We're talking about an active attack. If only to expose the content, whether to expose the details of the sender receiver or the flow, the data itself, or all of them, only to expose. So it is, let's say, it's a sort of a flow analyzer. It's a sniffing only, and that's it. Simply like that. So it's a static or it's an active attack. And when we use the word attack here, we are not meaning that it is a negative act from the beginning, because security experts, they do scan, searching for vulnerabilities, and they make the exploitation by attacking the environment. It might be a sort of exploitation, simply, not only a non-ethical attack. It might be an ethical one. I'll be passing through. If you have any concern, you just raise the question, please. Yes. So here actually we reach a level via which we are going to see technical approaches in plural to activate network attacks, to do the necessary network attacks. The skills we need to know or to learn in order to master the network actually exploitation techniques. So to exploit for an issue, to exploit for a security level, even to say that the security is on top, you have to know the security techniques, the technical approaches to do an attack. Technical approaches to do an attack. Great. So let's dig in. Usually and frequently, actually, when we talk about network attacks, we are talking about network services to be attacked. And what is it meant by network services? We are talking about the network protocols that they actually carrying out services over the network layer. Yes, so to do a network attack, actually, technically, either we are going to use a protocol to attack, or we are going to attack a protocol itself as a service, and so on. So in this range, or maybe both. Starting with the first, actually, very famous network service, which is the network management protocol. And in here, we are able to see that this is a tool used for, let's say, managing the network devices, switches, routers, and things like that belonging to the network layer from the OSI model. Well, it is actually it is actually still an old version, but still it is actually one of the famous services used for managing such network devices. From the network management, we go to the more specific protocol or service, which is the domain name system, and for sure recognized with the abbreviation DNS server or DNS system. which is actually a protocol or service utilized by all the network devices to make a match in between the alphanumerical address or destination of a resource and the IP address representing the host, the service provider, where the resource is hosted. Meaning that we as humans, for example, we type www.favabay.com, but the computer does not recognize what is favabay.com. It recognizes, for example, 66.75.123.111 IP address. The matching between those two, the www.favabay.com and the 66.67 and so on, the IP address, it is the role of this instructor. So the DNS, yeah, it's sort of a service to make the match in between what the human being knows or recognizes or understands or memorizes and to what the machine recognizes, clearly the technical view. Yeah, very easy. And it does not have any relationship with the context of security. So the DNS, it was designed to do such a service without tackling any security concern. So it is not to discuss the security of the DNS. It is only to discuss the match between the domain and the IP address. Only to match. Yes, great. So here, for example, a user is trying to visit the myspace.com. Myspace.com has the address to 16.78.38.130. If the scenario of swapping or making a falsified match in between the myspace.com and a new IP address happens, so here we talk about DNS poisoning. DNS poison, we are just injecting a poison to the DNS, let's say, provider DNS system. DNS poison is context via which we are, or an attacker tries to or succeeds in falsifying the match in between the IP address and the physical, let's say, physical address. Yeah. So once happened, DNS poison is successful. Yes, the DNS matching actually it starts from the local computer. So this is a window where we can see a list of IP addresses and domains that they are matched here, put into match in a file nominated hosts. The hosts file is a Windows-based file. It is available with this list of details, but if you want to add more, you just add new line, new line, new line. Simple. So the DNS matching or the DNS service, let's say it is available or it is seen within the hosts file. And the DNS poisoning is to falsify this file. Simple. So we see the lab actually, just to falsify this file. We will make an insertion of a list of IP addresses, but falsified with modified destination addresses. As you can note here, it is a simple notepad used to open this house file. It is simple. It's a simple notepad here used to open this host. So Yes, we can save it with falsified content. Thus, we can succeed doing the DNS poisoning. Okay, from the DNS poisoning to the DNS cache poisoning. Here's another technique or attack that we can face on the networks, computer networks, where we can see an attacker dominating a service provider. Are you able to receive me now, please?
Yes, Richter.
Yeah, great. So we continue. The second protocol, the second service on the network that we can refer to, yes, do such an approach, exploitation, or things like that. The ARP, address resolution protocol, which is another service utilized for making the matching between the IP addresses and the physical address of the service provider. That's me. Here, a service provider is not identified only with the IP address. The IP address is a logical, it's a sort of a logical IP, it's a logical address manually set. Can be modified, depends on the network size, on the network location, the country, and so on. But the physical address, no. The MAC address, the medium access control address, it's from the manufacturing date, and it will remain with the device all along its life cycle. It will not be modified. The MAC address. The margin between the logical address, which is the IP address, and the MAC address is the role of the RP protocol, the ARPA protocol. Very simple. So, making a matching between the physical address of a device and an IP address logical, let's say, identification tool is the role of this IRP, this protocol. This is what this our protocol does. This serves. Okay, what's the problem here? The problem, or the problematic view is that the MAC addresses, they are also to be falsified. The IP addresses, they can be actually falsified. They are logical identification only. But the MAC address is the problematic view. Why? Because an attacker might falsify the MAC address of a physical, let's say, of a real service provider, mimicking its status. Yes, it can utilize the MAC address of a real computer to make a device redirect, and we define what is a device redirect. So, the device redirect can cause a network breach like the ERP cache poison, So here, like the DNS cache poison, here the ERP cache poison will be in action. What happens in this ERP cache poison attack? An attacker would dominate a service provider, who would have the control on this service provider. Then after, he will catch and see all the requests, the legitimate requests coming from an attacker, sorry, from a legitimate user. All of those legitimate requests, once the attacker recognizes them, he will try to be very fast and faster than the service provider to respond the legitimate client. The first response that the client receives, he will admit. The others, they would be neglected. So the attacker has to be only faster than the service provider in order to dominate the computer, the receiver, or the attacker, sorry, the victim. If happened, means the attacker has replied faster than the service provider to the client, so the client will accept the attacker's reply, and thus the up cache poison has succeeded. The up cache poison has succeeded in this point only. Okay, some of the terminologies due to the herb poison attacks. Yeah, there will be a data steal, absolutely, since you reach to mimic the MAC address and you succeeded in doing the ARP cache poisoning. So you'll be able to steal the data communicated with the service provider. Absolutely, either it is your ID or something like that. The MAC fluiden, like we talked and we defined in an early age, switch fluiden. The MAC fluiden here, the same device provider, the device where the service provider is, he would be actually identifying devices based on their MAC addresses. What does mean? Means actually you'll have actually a wireless access point at home, and this wireless access home will grant access based on the MAC address. Every single user tries to access the network, he would be identifying himself versus the, let's say, presented his MAC address. So the device, the access point, will filter MAC addresses. If the device is having a long list of devices trying to be authenticated using the MAC address. So what can be this? This is a sort of a MAC fluiden because the device will not be able to serve all the replies in just one time. MAC fluiden. A consequence also of the herb poison, herb cache poison, is to deny the access to the internet. So if your ID is no longer with you, so you'll not be able to access the internet, the public network. Again, if the herb cache poison has succeeded, this means that there have been an attacker who did that. The attacker is sort of a man in the middle. Man in the middle. Man in the middle attack. Any questions, please? Okay. If you remember very well, yes, last class we defined the site jacking and the cross-site request forgery, the CRSF. Actually, we said that it is a sort of non-legitimate use of others' resources, and the resources here meant are the cookies. The same way here we are talking about the TCP/IP hijacking. So is the negative side of the TCP/IP protocol bundle, via which we can see the TCP and the IP protocol being utilized to falsify communication with an end user. Actually, the TCP/IP protocol or list of protocols, they are responsible for transmitting and making the remote communication be successful. They are the controllers, they are the service providers, simply. And every and each single actually communicated media would be segregated into frames, and the frames, they are going to be having a header size, a full size, whatever the size is, but they would be actually with a specific size. And those communicated frames and packets with the specific size, they are to be sent in a sequence, and there has to be actually an acknowledgement size of the sent frames and packets. Yeah, here actually is a sort of sequence via which you can see a TCP/IP in action. Okay, Any questions, please? Any questions at so far at this level?
Thank you, Dr. Amir.
No.
Okay. We continue. The wireless scenario is actually the context of the all the techniques we saw so far, the services we discussed, that they actually define and the techniques to access service, to access services over the network. They are not unique because we can see the wireless network also is considered with the issues of the digital security. Let's take the example of the TCP/IP. The TCP/IP is not the best protocol bundle to apply or to control or to, let's say, secure when we talk about a wireless network. Why? Because when discussing the wireless scenario, the protocol in question, mainly talking about services over the wireless networks, is the UDP, the user datagram protocol. This one is responsible for transmitting wireless frames. Yes, wireless frames at the end. And those frames totally, they are actually having a static path from source to destination. There is no acknowledgement of reception, sure, but the path is there. So whatever here, what I wanted to tell you is that the services, they are a question of the services to talk, or the protocols to talk. They are a question of the service that you are willing to deliver, to use, or let's say to refer to. Okay, for what it concerns the wireless attacks, let's take the example of University of Nizwa network, and let me ask you a question. Can anybody from outside of the University of Nizwa get access to the wireless network using his own mobile? The answer here is the answer to what is a rogue access point. Why? Because if this external user from outside of university receives the signal of the wireless and can access without being authenticated, can access the network wirelessly without being authenticated. If the answer is yes, so the access point used by the attacker is a rogue point. Simply, the rogue access point or the rogue point is a non-protected wireless point that gives actually access to non-legitimate users or not legitimate yes, users. I'll stop at this level. I'll give you the recall right after. Any questions, please?